Robert Durst, R-O-B-E-R-T, D-U-R-S-T.
Thank you.
And may I move up there, Your Honor?
Yes, you may sit near Mr. Durst.
Bob? Did you kill Susan Berman?
No,
Do you know who did?
no, I do not.
Do you realize you have an absolute right not to testify?
I am aware of that.
Do you want to testify in your own behalf?
Yes,
I want to first ask you about some of your health problems. Are you hard of hearing?
I am hard of hearing.
You have hearing aids. Do they help?
I have hearing aids.
Do they help?
Yes,
Are you able to hear me without using that screen in front of you?
no,
I want to ask about your health problems first.
I've got lots of them.
We've got all day.
The health problems that affect me every day, all the time, are hydrocephalus, which means my balance is no good. I was operated on and given a shunt, which you can see on my hairline. The shunt is supposed to relieve pressure on my brain. I do believe that it helps me, but I still need a walker to walk around. The other health problem that affects me all the time is that I have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So when I inhale, my lungs do not remove enough oxygen, or as much oxygen as they should. So I find myself constantly having to breathe through my mouth. And there are a whole bunch of things which I'm not really aware of as the day goes on. I have high blood pressure. I have osteoporosis. That means my bones are fragile. I have neuropathy in my right leg below the knee. I have chronic kidney disease. I've had 2 major operations for cancer. The first in 2007, they removed my esophagus. That was a major operation. I was in the hospital on morphine for 23 days. The surgeon said that one of the after effects of being on morphine for so long is that I would think more slowly than I did in the past. In 2018, here in Los Angeles, at LAC, USC, I was operated on for bladder cancer. That was a relatively minor operation, but I go back and forth with the urologists. Some of them want to give me a catheter, others say I don't need the catheter. Right now and during this trial, I have a catheter. I think I'm finished.
Do you sometimes have difficulty breathing?
Yes.
And the catheter that you mentioned, of course, is visible to the jurors, the tube coming down from your leg and into the device on your wheelchair.
Do you want me to hold it up?
No, I just want, my question is that the result of the catheter?
It's the result of having cancer bladder.
All right.
Bladder, yes, cancer bladder.
I want to start with talking about when you were a child. How many brothers or sisters do you have?
I have a younger brother who's 2 years younger than me, named Douglas. My sister is 4 years younger than me. Her name is Wendy. And I have a little brother whose name is Tommy, and he is 7 years younger than me.
Your mother, before your mother died, who among your family did you favor, and who among your family did your brother Douglas favor?
From what I remember as a little kid, whether we were playing Go Fish or Uno or Frisbee or whatever, it was always Mommy and Bobby against Daddy and Douglas. I always loved my mother, and I would make an effort to get along with my father.
How old were you when your mother died?
I was 7 years old when my mother died. She was 32. She either jumped or fell from the roof of our monster home in Scarsdale, New York.
Were you there when that happened?
Yes, it was a typical Sunday night. My grandfather
Objection relevant.
had come up from the city for Sunday night dinner.
Motion to strike the answer, Your Honor.
Stricken.
Were you, what is your recollection of that night when she died?
My grandfather came into my bedroom and woke me up, walked me out into the hall, and pointed out the hall window and said, "Look, Bobby, there's Mommy on the roof." I looked out the window and there was Mommy on the roof. Now my grandfather did not say, "Good God, there's Mommy on the roof." It was just very flat. "There's Mommy on the roof. Wave at Mommy." So I waved at
Motion to
Mommy.
strike relevant.
It's late. Your objection's late. Overruled.
Did you see her fall?
I did not see whether she jumped or fell.
Did you see her after she fell?
I saw her on the roof. I waved at Mommy on the roof. Then I was brought to my bedroom, and shortly thereafter, I heard my father yell, "Call the fire department." Shortly after that, I heard our maid, Mary, yell she's off the roof. Then there were lots of people in the house. I know now that it was, that it was the police department, the fire department, and the medical examiner's office, with lots of people walking around taking photographs. I was kind of left alone. My younger siblings were taken to a neighbor's house. I walked outside, and there was Mommy.
Objection, relevant to
On
this
the
one. Also, there's no
cobblestone.
question pending and it's calling for a narrative. I've let it go for
Right.
a long time.
Next question.
What did you see?
Objection, relevant.
I
Sustained.
saw my mother lying on
Sustained.
the
Motion to
cobblestone
strike.
in
Strike.
her nightgown.
Your Honor, I don't know that Mr. Durst either, he's not hearing your.
No, he isn't. So
Well,
I'll
or he's
tell the
just
jury to,
disregarding it.
If it's all right, Your Honor, I'll use hand signals to stop when appropriate.
it seemed that you were trying to do that, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. DeGuerin. The jury's to disregard that question and answer.
You were here in the courtroom when your brother Douglas testified that you weren't there. Were you there, and what did you see?
My brother Douglas testified that you could not see the part of the roof where my mother fell or jumped from the inside hall window. I've repeatedly said the same thing. You look out the window, you see the roof. Anyone could determine the facts of the situation simply by going to 27 Hampton Road, Scarsdale, New York. I went back in 2007.
Objection.
The house was
Also
identical.
352, also.
There's an
calling for a
objection.
narrative.
Okay, pause. Those are overruled, but no narrative. So let's stop there, and you may ask another question.
We have to have it question and answer, Bob. So I will stop you when you go on too long. Understand?
I mean, I know the rules. It just depends how they're handled.
Did you see your mother in the driveway?
Yes, I saw my mother on the
Objection,
driveway.
relevant, Your Honor.
And when
Overruled.
Douglas Durst says that I could not have seen my mother on the roof from the window in the second floor hallway, Douglas Durst was lying. And there have been about a dozen newspaper articles, magazine articles, questioning whether I could have seen my mother on the roof. Now, this is a problem the media has.
Let's,
All anyone's
objection,
got to
narrative.
know.
Yeah, thank you. I'm stopping that. This was a narrative. I'm striking the part about newspaper articles. He said that his brother Douglas was lying. I'll allow that, and we'll strike the rest.
So, bottom line, did you see your mother on the driveway?
I saw my mother on the driveway, on the cobblestones, in her nightgown. They say she died instantly.
For years after that, as you were growing up, did you have problems associated with that?
Objection, relevant, Your Honor.
Sustained.
And 352.
Sustained.
Your Honor, can we close this out for a moment, please?
Yes? Thank you. Just a moment.
17-year-old Bobby Durst knew that it was my father's fault. Bobby Durst did not know how or why or anything like that, but Bobby Durst knew that his father had killed his mother. I started running away. Every couple of weeks, the neighborhood we lived in, there was nothing that was not a McMansion. Giant houses, all had outdoor garages. I quickly learned which houses left their garage doors open. I would go into a garage.
Motion to strike at this point as non-responsive and narrative also.
We'll stop there. I don't want a whole narrative about this. Question and answer so that each question may be evaluated. Perhaps Mr. Durst can hold that microphone. Can he grab? No? Okay, he can't hold the microphone. Perhaps we can make it a little closer to him. Or Mr. Durst, if you will talk right into that microphone. The most important thing is that everybody hear you.
How about I take off her mask?
Let's see.
Can I
Let's
take
try.
off
Let's try.
the
Try the
mask?
microphone. Try talking into the microphone, and if necessary,
What
we may
did
go
he
there.
say?
He said, try talking into the microphone first, and if that doesn't work, you can take off the mask.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Okay. Am I answering a question?
No.
Not yet. Next question.
You mentioned that you started
I have
running
an
away.
idea. Why don't you let John tell you what questions he wants me to answer?
I'd rather not.
I'm available to talk, sure.
You'll have your chance.
You mentioned you started running away. What were you running away from?
The house. I hated the house. Tommy Durst testified how much I hated the house and how I kept begging my father to move. Yet he never sold the house where his wife died.
Objection,
We
relevance,
sat
also
there for all
352.
18 years.
All right, overruled. You must object contemporaneously for me to sustain it.
Your Honor, does the court want me to interrupt him? I'm trying to.
You may listen to the question. If the question is objectionable, you may pose an objection. I will rule on the objection. We'll proceed in that way.
Your Honor, what does the court want me to do when Mr. Guerin asks a non-objectionable question, but then it just continues and goes into something else? I'm trying to give the witness the respect.
You may object to a narrative.
Okay.
So Bob, what that means is, let me ask questions. Don't go into a long narrative, and I'll try to interrupt it with questions. You understand?
Hard to give a short narrative.
You
We'll
may
see.
listen to the question, and you may answer only the question. You may proceed, Mr. DeGuerin.
You mentioned that you ran away. You mentioned that there were many houses that had garages that you knew you could hide in. What were you running away from?
From the house where my mother died.
Overruled. The answer may stand.
I'm not sure that it was heard, Your Honor. May he repeat
He said his
the answer?
mother died.
No.
Next question.
I'm sorry. Did you run away from camp?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
I ran away from everything. My father kept sending me to see psychiatrists. And all the psychiatrists.
Motion to strike is non-responsive.
I'll strike the part about psychiatrists.
Did you go to see psychiatrists?
Motion to strike is irrelevant.
No,
Also
well,
calling
no,
for hearsay.
No, irrelevant.
Yeah.
Sustained. Sustained.
Yes, I saw many psychiatrists.
Motion
I
to
said,
strike.
okay, let's
Oh.
pause for a second. So, a couple things. If I sustain an objection, you may not answer, Mr. Durst. In that case, I did sustain the objection. That means you could not answer. The jury's to disregard the answer and disregard the question. A juror raised his hand. It has to do with hearing or seeing.
Here, can we make sure the microphone's on? It doesn't sound like it's on.
All right. Let's check that.
It's not.
Will you press the top, please? That's the on button. A green light will illuminate. Excellent. Let's try again with a mic that has been turned on.
Gold star for number 2.
Thank you.
Did you run away from school?
I ran away from school. I ran away from every place they took me. Eventually, yes, I ran away from school.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Scarsdale Elementary, Fox Meadow Elementary School, and Scarsdale High School.
Did you graduate from high school?
Yes, I barely graduated from high school because I never spent any time there.
Did you go to college?
I went to Lehigh University, Lehigh.
Where is Lehigh University located?
Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Let me finish my question. In Bethlehem, Pennsylvania?
Yes,
Is that near where you were arrested after Morris Black died?
it's exactly where I was arrested. I was arrested in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
We'll get to that. Not yet. How did you do in Lehigh? Did you graduate?
I managed to graduate, yes.
After Lehigh, what was going on in the country? Was that during the time of the Vietnam War?
Yes,
And were you draft eligible?
I was available, but for whatever the reason is, probably because I'd seen so many psychiatrists,
Objection, relevance.
draft board never called me.
All right, the draft board never called you.
Motion to strike.
I'll strike it. Non-responsive.
Did the draft board ever call you?
No. Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Well, did you go into the service?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Well, this is his background, Your Honor.
Yes.
What did you do?
I don't know what the question is.
What did you do after Lehigh? Did you go into the service? Did you go into the...
No, I went to UCLA.
How did you get into UCLA?
I applied to half a dozen graduate schools, and I was accepted in some of them. One of them was UCLA.
What sort of graduate courses were you looking to take?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
I was in the PhD economics program.
Is economics something that was of interest to you at the time?
Sort of, I guess.
So why did you choose UCLA?
It seemed like it should. Los Angeles, Hollywood, movies, it sounded like fun.
And was it fun?
Yes.
Tell the jury about how you met Susan Berman.
Well, after my first year at UCLA, 1966, friends of mine from New York, Stuart Altman and his younger brother Eric, came out and visited me. The Beta Theta Pi fraternity house in Westwood had a big sign out front that said rooms for rent. So the three of us rented a big room for the summer.
Were you a member of Beta Theta Pi, or did you just rent a room from them?
I had nothing to do with Beta Theta Pi, just rented the room.
Okay, go ahead. How did you meet Susan Berman?
So one night, what we did all summer long was to hang out at the Dykstra Pool, just west of UCLA's main campus, south of Sunset. I guess everybody knows that. There are a bunch of dormitories and a big recreation center. The first dorm that was built was called Dykstra, D-Y-K-S-T-R-A. And we spent the summer by the pool trying to pick up girls. One night I got back to the fraternity house around 9 or 10, and Stuart Altman introduced me to the girl that he had picked up that afternoon. Her name was Susan Berman. I readily found out that both her parents were dead and that her father had owned hotels in Las Vegas and had something to do with the mob.
Let me stop you. When you first met Susan Berman, did you and she hit it off?
Yes.
Explain that to the jury.
Well, the only thing Stuart Altman was interested in was the fact that Susan Berman had decided that she was going to keep it until she got married. So Stuart wandered off someplace, and Susan and I stayed up all night and talked. Stephen Silverman, who testified, said that when you have a conversation with Susan Berman, you listen. Well, whatever it was, that night I was relatively talkative, and we spent the whole night talking.
So what did you find in common with you and Susan?
Well, both of us were raised by others than our parents. Her parents were both dead. Her father died when she was 7. Her mother died when she was 12. My mother died when I was 7. My father couldn't handle me because I kept running away, and he kept sending me to see psychiatrists. The psychiatrist...
Objection, motion to strike is non-responsive. Also, it's a narrative.
All right, we are at a narrative, and let's see, just a moment.
The psychiatrist stuff I'm asking to be stricken.
Well, I will. I'm looking at anything else. No, I don't think so. We'll strike the psychiatrist part. The rest may stand.
Your Honor, could Mr. Durst be instructed not to bring up anything about psychiatrists unless he specifically asked, because it's coming up frequently?
Yeah, listen to the question, answer only the question.
Thank you,
Was,
Your Honor.
was there a period of time in your youth where you were sent to see psychiatrists on a regular basis?
Objection 352.
Sustained.
Yes, I
No,
saw that.
Sustained. Sustained. Mr. DeGuerin, we already,
I
I sustained this objection
I
already.
just stopped him, Your Honor.
I know, but you asked the same question and only to stop him. Don't do that, please. Ask questions, don't ask questions to which an objection will be sustained. And I've already made clear what will be sustained.
Was your father an absentee father?
Objection relevance.
Sustained.
My father was.
Sustained. If I sustain an objection, do not answer the question. Next question, please.
So, how did you feel that you and Susan had things in common?
We were both rich. Susan had a trust fund and paid her $2,500 a month. Susan had a Mercedes-Benz SL. That first night we met, and it got to be morning, she took me out to her car, and we drove to Ship's Restaurant on in Westwood. And we pretty much talked until it was lunchtime.
All right, so you meet Susan Berman, you hit it off with her immediately, you stay up all night talking, you go to Ship's Restaurant the next day. Did your friendship with Susan continue?
Yes, we stayed friends. The next year, I applied to Claremont Graduate School.
All right. Now, where is Claremont Graduate School?
It's in Claremont, California. It's about an hour and 15 minutes east of Los Angeles.
Now, was this during your school at UCLA? Did you interrupt your school at UCLA?
I just left UCLA. For the 1 year I went to Claremont Graduate School, and then I went back to UCLA.
In the meantime, what did Susan do?
Susan graduated from UCLA, and she applied to Berkeley's graduate school in journalism, where she was accepted. At the time, I believe Berkeley's journalism program was considered the best in the West. I think it still is. And
All right. So Susan went to Berkeley in Northern California, right?
right.
And you went to Claremont Graduate School.
And then I went back to UCLA.
All right. So after Susan moved to Northern California to attend Berkeley, what did you do?
We visited each other frequently.
Bob, were you and Susan ever lovers?
No,
How would you characterize your friendship?
best friends.
All right. In the next few years, what happened as far as you and Susan
In
were concerned?
1968, I applied to become a VISTA, a volunteer in service to America.
Let me stop you there. What gave you the idea to become a VISTA volunteer?
They had a table at UCLA with information about VISTA. I walked by and I liked it, and I applied to become a VISTA.
And where was Susan Berman at that time?
Susan had become I guess first she graduated from journalism school about the same time as I went into Vista. She got a job with the San Francisco Chronicle, and after 1 year, she went to work for something that was called City Magazine.
Is that a local publication in San Francisco?
Yes, it was very popular, but it did not last very long. But Susan became a star. She wrote an article, a cover article, called "Why I Can't Get Laid in San Francisco." And this made the front page of the magazine. And the San Francisco Chronicle picked it up on their front page too, with a big picture of Susan.
Were you proud of her success?
Well, I sort of thought it was the wrong thing for her career, but she liked it and she got lots of job opportunities from it.
In the meantime, what were you doing as a Vista volunteer?
Well, being a Vista volunteer was interesting. They sent me to Watts, and I lived in Watts, and I worked for an agency. Can I get some water?
Yes.
Here you go, Dick, I got it. I got it. Got it in the wrong one.
I've got one.
You mentioned they sent you to Watts. What year was this?
1969.
Was this, what was the situation in Watts during that time?
Objection, relevance.
The state,
What was Vista doing there?
Objection, relevance.
What did you do?
Objection, relevance.
overruled.
They set up my program. All of us were in some way related to business. And we were supposed to help the people in business in Watts, mostly through getting bank loans, small business
Objection, relevance.
administration loans.
352 as well.
Overruled. Move on though.
Your Honor, but he
Yes.
interrupted, so I'm not sure the jury heard the answer because he was speaking over him.
Everybody hear the answer? They're nodding. I heard it. Everybody heard it. Thank you. Go ahead.
Was Vista more or less a domestic Peace Corps?
Yes,
And so how long were you associated with Vista and in what?
for a year.
What did you physically do as a Vista volunteer?
I met with small business people in Watts, and I helped them fill out small business administration applications. In some cases, I co-signed loans.
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
You may continue.
Your Honor, may we
No.
approach, Your Honor,
No.
may we approach, please?
No, but the narrative ends. Next question.
So, helping small businesses get loans for business, I presume, is that right?
Yes,
And what else did you do?
that's what I did.
All right. How long were you in that program?
A year.
And then what did you do?
Well, I had read this, that at the time, there was something called the Whole Earth Review. And it was kind of a hippie book magazine. And I read about an article about people opening health food stores, mostly in New England. So I got the idea that I would go to New England and open a health food store. Really a health food general store.
All right, I'll ask you about that in a moment. But did you return to UCLA before you went to New England?
No, I just left.
So you did not graduate from,
Did not get a degree, no.
okay. All right, so you got the idea that you wanted to have a health food store, but more or less a general store in New England. Is that right?
Yes.
What did you do in order to accomplish that?
Well, my father owned a big house an hour and a half north of New York City. It was a typical rich person's house on 11 acres, a glass house on top of a hill with a pool and a tennis court. So I called up Dad and asked him if it was all right if I moved into the Katona house, Katonah. Dad had bought it because everybody felt he should not have to stay in the city during the weekends. The thing of it was is that Dad loved the city, and having this house was more of a problem than a solution.
So, what was your plan about the Katona house that your father owned and was not using?
I just moved into it. Dad wanted me to go into the family business, which is called the Durst organization. And at that time was one of probably the top 10 owners of office space in Manhattan.
Did you want to go into the Durst organization business?
No,
I want to ask a little bit about the history of the Durst organization. There's been some evidence that it was a tradition for the oldest member of the family to take over the business. How many siblings did Seymour Durst have?
Seymour Durst had 4 siblings.
Who started the Durst organization?
My grandfather, Joseph Durst. Joseph and Rose Durst had 5 children, from oldest to youngest. They were Edwin Durst, Alma Durst Askin, Seymour Durst, my father, Royal Durst, and David Durst.
So, if it had been the tradition for the oldest sibling to take over. That would not have been Seymour, was it?
No, it was never like that.
What was it like?
Well, Edwin Durst just didn't like it. So I wasn't there, but seemingly from the very beginning, he did not like New York City, and he did not like the real estate business. So my grandfather gave up trying to get Edwin Durst to run the business. So the next oldest one was my father, Seymour Durst.
Did Seymour run the business after your grandfather gave it up?
Yes,
All right. And basically what was and is this Durst organization business in New York?
in New York City, particularly in Manhattan, all the properties are very small. So if you're going to build a big building, you have to buy up a whole bunch of little properties and get the tenants out. New York City has very strong rent control laws. I think a lot stronger than out here. Once a tenant is in a residential facility, they can stay there until they die, as long as they pay the rent. So the business was buying small buildings, removing the tenants, demolishing the small buildings, using the land for parking, until you got enough little buildings together to build a big building.
So was that more or less the business plan of the Durst organization?
That was it.
Did you have any interest in doing that?
Well, that summer, when I was 69, I spent,
You just said that summer when I was 69. Are you talking about the year 1969?
I'm sorry, I meant to say 1969.
Okay, that summer, go ahead.
I spent a lot of time driving around New England and looking at little towns, trying to find a place where I would be comfortable living and running a store. And
Were you living at the Katona house by then?
yes, and Dad kept leaning on me to come into the business so he could show me the business.
Did you want to do that?
No,
What did you want to do?
I wanted to go open my store someplace.
And that was the idea that you had come across when you were a Vista volunteer and when you were in school in California?
When I finished my Vista program, I left Los Angeles and moved to New York. Vista was the past.
And so when you were driving, you just testified you were driving around New England looking for a place to start a store. Was that the plan that you had from California?
Yeah,
All right. Did you find a place that you thought would be good for your plan to have a health food store or a general store in New England?
yes, Middlebury, Vermont. It's a small town with a very selective college. Middlebury College is one of the most selective small colleges in the country.
So describe, if you will, what you thought was ideal for your plan to to have a health food store and a general store?
Section of relevance in 352.
Or
I guess the answer to the question is yes.
That's not the, no, that wouldn't be an appropriate answer. Here, let me repeat my question. Did you find that Middlebury, Vermont was an ideal place for your plan for a health food store and general store?
The answer is yes.
What was it about that place that caused you to make that decision?
It was quaint. I really don't know. There was no competition. There were lots of towns that would have been great, but somebody had already gotten there.
Okay, so what did you find? What were you able to do?
I leased space, 4,000 square feet in Middlebury, Vermont, signed a lease to open the store.
And did you have a place to live there?
Objection 352, Your Honor.
I rented the downstairs of a house
overruled.
Oh, go ahead.
for $80 a month.
80, 80? Did you say $80 a month?
The store rent was $130 a month. The apartment rent was $80 a month.
Did you have sufficient income to pay that rent?
Yes, from the time I was 18, there were family trusts that paid me an income. That's when I answered before. One of the things Susan Berman and I both had in common is that we both had trust funds set up by our parents.
Okay, when you find this store to rent, and you find a house to rent or home to rent in Middlebury, was it your plan to live in Katona or to live in Middlebury?
Plan was to live in Middlebury.
You had been living at the Katona house, right?
Yes, and I left things in one of the bedrooms. I would periodically go to New York and stay at the Katona house. And I went along with Dad's desire, and I would visit the business. I can't say I worked there. I would just go to some meetings and things
Objection,
that
narrative.
Dad wanted me to do.
Okay, I
Okay,
need to
we'll
break it
stop
up
there.
with questions.
We'll pause. Yes, it's becoming a narrative. We have ordinarily one lawyer, not two, object. Are you passing the torch to Mr. Bailey and Mr. Lewin?
No.
Oh,
Dick, he's
one,
objected more than me. You should
No,
probably-
rules of court provide for one attorney to perform a task at a time. Otherwise, I got Tenny doing it, and
No, well,
it'll drive me, really drive me
Mr.
crazy.
Bailey was just over enthusiastic, Your Honor, trying to move this along.
Thought maybe he
well,
fell
that's the
asleep.
pot calling the kettle black.
All right, enough fun. Back to work. Next question.
Who else lived at the Katona house when you were there?
When I got there, there was nobody there. But sometime that fall, my brother Douglas decided that he wanted to work in the family business, and he moved into the same house in Katona, New York, with his wife and his two children.
What was the relationship between you and Douglas Durst at that time?
We never liked one another. Fortunately, the house was very big, and he could have his end of it, and I could have my end of it. And I was hardly there anyway.
So where were you spending your time?
I was spending my time in Middlebury.
Just as an aside, where was Susan Berman and what was she doing while this was going on, while you were starting your store in Middlebury?
Susan had had this great success with her cover article about not being able to get laid. And she had stayed with City magazine. And at some point, around 1969 or 1970, Susan decided that she wanted to write a book about her life story of growing up in Las Vegas. Her father's name was Davy Berman, who was a well-known associate of Bugsy Siegel. Bugsy Siegel's right-hand man, he was called.
All right. And so she wanted to...
I think we'll take a little break now. We had sort of a long break earlier, longer than I planned, but I think a short break for everyone in case you need just to rearrange ourselves. So let's take 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Let's go to 3:45. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form
in this case regarding information about Mr. Durst's activities that relate to the case or information that touches certain witnesses who have testified. It is quite another for them to put on a narrative of kind of poor little rich boy and then interpose things like, and maybe the court didn't hear my objection. I objected when Mr. Durst volunteered that in addition to arranging loans, he said sometimes he would give them the loans himself.
No.
Which is clearly try and appear to this jury as if he has certain attributes that are clearly irrelevant. So my issue, Your Honor, and I want to respect the court's position, if the court believes that all this is relevant and this isn't privy to, then I'm not going to object. But I'm trying to understand how questions about what rent he paid in All Good Things in the late 60s, how that's not relevant to anything that we put on. It's not relevant to any defense they have. And I'm concerned. I'm secondarily concerned with the idea, and it hasn't happened for a while, that Mr. Durst wants to bring up his treatment by psychiatrists. As the court's aware, the defense had ample opportunity, in fact they said they were going to do it, to call a mental health expert to testify to these things. I don't know if the court is aware of it, but in the Galveston trial, the reason that they later said they did not call an expert in Galveston was because they were able to get Mr. Durst to testify about this information without objection. So my concern is that what we've got here is we've got an attempt to kind of sneak in this information by Mr. Durst without any cross-examination. So those are the issues, and I'm hoping the court can provide some guidance and also to mention to Mr. Durst that he is not to mention anything. The word psychiatrist should not come out of his mouth.
Mr. Lewin, first of all, you're not correct that Mr. Durst testified that he gave loans. He did say he co-signed Vista loans. I'm not sure what that means. It does not mean personally giving a loan. He did mention psychiatrists. I've stricken that at every occasion, and each occasion it's non-responsive. Had there been a question about psychiatry or psychological treatment, I would have sustained your objection. The jury should not hear about psychiatry. Not only that, it doesn't amount to a defense. I'm not instructing on any psychiatric defense unless there's some evidence of it. None has been presented.
You're the cosigner.
I have given you enormous leeway in giving context to your presentation. I'm giving some leeway to the defense on the idea that Mr. DeGuerin is going to tie this into relevant evidence. However, the entirety of a person's experience is that may be relevant to the case is not simply the facts and circumstances of the commission of crimes. Therefore, I'm going to let the defense have some leeway to present a story in a coherent way that it includes, hopefully, the specifics behind his initial denial of responsibility.
This is why, Your Honor, as the court's aware, I was not objecting much. I am concerned, the court's right, when he says, though, that he's co-signing, in the end, whether he's giving the loan or co-signing the loan, that is still an irrelevant issue that is certainly injected as a means of making look at it as if Mr. Durst is a certain kind of individual,
Yes,
etc.
people try to make themselves look good with adding a word or two to their answers. If that specific word isn't responsive, the balance of the answer was responsive. I wasn't going to strike his answer because he volunteered a word or two that made him look good. If you want to cross-examine him about his co-signing of loans for people who he was helping through the VISTA program, that's fine. It seemed to me that you explored the circumstances of his development of a friendship with Susan Berman. This is the other side of that. He's describing how their lives intersected and when they did not, why they did not. So I'm giving the defense, as I said, a little bit of leeway to make a coherent presentation. That is the reason why I've overruled some of your objections, and that is the spirit with which I will rule on future objections.
No problem, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Recess.
So did Susan move to New York?
I need a little background here. From shortly after I got back to New York, I had taken a floor in one of my family's townhouses and in the city, and I was using that when I stayed in the city. I told Susan that if she wanted to, she could move into my second bedroom. So Susan moved to New York and moved into the second bedroom in the town. New Yorkers call them brownstones. Out here they're called townhouses. So Susan moved in to the second bedroom on the one floor of a townhouse that I was using. She stayed there for about 6 months when she rented an apartment in a well-known area called Beekman Place.
Okay. During this time, Susan moves to New York, stays in your spare bedroom, and then gets her own place 6 months later. What were you doing? Were you working in New York, or were you working to open your store, or were you doing both?
I was spending very little time in the city. Most of my time I was in Middlebury, Vermont. But I still had friends from high school and college in the city. The man who introduced me to Susan, Stuart Altman, had graduated from Brooklyn Law School and had just gotten divorced. He needed a place to stay, so I had my residential leasing agent show him apartments in the city. He moved into a building 1 block from where I was living.
All right. I'm going to stop you there so I can ask you another question about that. The jury has seen Stuart Altman. We know that he also introduced you to Susan when you were going to UCLA. What role does Stuart Altman then play in your meeting Kathy McCormick, who later became your wife?
So one weekend, Stuart called me up and said the 2 cute girls had just moved into the building where he was renting an apartment. He brought them over to my apartment and we went out to dinner. One of them was Kathy McCormick. Kathy McCormick and I got along very, very well.
So tell us, from that very first moment, what was your impression of Kathy?
She was pretty. And she was interesting. We could talk for a long time. We stayed up most of the night just talking to one another. She had just gotten out of high school and had spent a year working for as a receptionist in a dental clinic. She did not have Kathy did not have any dental training. She could not clean teeth or anything like that. Her role was mostly to take the patients from the reception area into the dental rooms.
Okay, let me stop you there and ask another question. I'd ask you what your impression was of Kathy. Did you and she hit it off well?
We hit it off real well. We went out a couple more times in New York. And when I went up to Middlebury, Vermont, she came with me and stayed for 3 or 4 days.
Had you already opened your store in Vermont?
No, the store was still a work in progress. We were buying lumber for shelves and bookcases and cabinets, and we were doing a lot of the work ourselves, cutting 2x4s and cutting plywood.
So, to clarify, was the store open when you took Kathy up to Vermont with you, or not?
When Kathy first visited me, the store was not open. It took another couple of months. I was hiring students from Middlebury College. At the time, the minimum wage in Vermont was $1.60 an hour. So it was very inexpensive for me to hire students to help me build the store. Kathy must have visited me probably once every 3 weeks for 4 or 5 months. Each time she would stay a little longer. Then she went and quit her job at the dentist's office and moved in with me in Vermont.
So, from the period of time when you first met Kathy until she came to spend time with you in Vermont, until the time that she actually moved in with you in Vermont, tell the jury how your relationship with Kathy progressed.
Well, it progressed the usual way.
Did you fall in love?
Yeah, we were both in love. We both liked to be with each other. Middlebury, Vermont was very quaint, easy to live in. There was not much in the way of entertainment. You had to entertain yourselves.
Well, what was your business plan about the store?
Well, when a new store opens in a small town, the wholesalers are all very interested in getting you to stock your shelves with their products. In Vermont, there were a lot of farms. A lot of people grew vegetables and fruit and things where they had no place to sell. So we were able to very quickly go into business, and we could stock the shelves with everything we needed. And we would not have to make a payment for 6 months or a year. And if whatever it was that we had brought into the store did not sell, the wholesalers would take it back. So it was pretty easy to start the business from scratch. A typical day, Kathy and I would walk from the downstairs of this house we had rented to the store. It was about half a mile. I'd work in the store all day and walk home. Part of the house that we rented used wood for heat. So we learned about how to cut up logs using a bow saw and using a log splitter so that we had heat in the whole house. And we would cook these elaborate meals. The store sold a whole bunch of hippie-type books, things on how to bake bread, lots of recipe books, and things about living off the land.
Let me stop you and ask another question. The store had been your idea in the beginning, and then you met Kathy, and Kathy started spending more time until she actually moved in with you in Vermont. Tell the jury how Kathy took to the store and the idea of living in a small community.
Well, Kathy was from New York City, just outside of New York City. So everything was brand new to her in terms of a small town and what you did in a small town. Like bingo night was a great big deal. Everybody would go to bingo night because there wasn't much else there. There was one small movie theater. Periodically, if you went to the 9 o'clock show, there'd be a sign up on the door that nobody had showed up for the 7 o'clock, and the guy had canceled the 9 o'clock. There were few restaurants. Living in a small town was as new to her as it was to me. Everybody knew everybody. The postman lived upstairs.
Did you like it? Did you like it?
We both liked it.
And I was going to ask you if Kathy took to it also.
We both liked it.
What role did Kathy play in running the store?
Same as me. We both worked on building shelves and cabinets, and we both worked at cash register, and we both worked on the opening of the boxes that the stuff came in.
So you worked
putting
side?
it on the shelves and putting prices on it.
So you worked side by side?
Yeah,
Did you enjoy that?
yeah.
What was the situation with the Durst organization and your father in New York during that time?
Well, my dad visited us probably once every couple of months and stayed overnight at the Middlebury Inn. And Dad was very interested in convincing me that I should come back to New York because obviously the store was never going to make me rich. He was right. It was never going to make me rich.
Did that matter to you?
It didn't bother me at all.
Why
Because
not?
I was making so much money from the trust income. More money came in every month than I could possibly spend. My biggest expense was paying income tax on my income. Other than that, I spent very little money.
Well, did you see the store as being a huge success or not?
It was a success to me. It made a little bit of money. Well, I didn't really care that much. Sometimes when we looked over what we were doing, we would realize that we were selling stuff for less than what we had bought it for. Well, I mean, it was never something where we needed the money, because we had money.
What did you call the store?
All good things.
How did you land on that name?
It comes from something or other which I can't remember right now.
So what did the store sell other than natural food? You said it was
We
natural
sold
food.
a little bit of everything, a little bit of hardware. If you wanted a hammer, we had a hammer. If you wanted nails, we had some nails. If you wanted a screwdriver, we had a screwdriver and some screws. We sold some toiletries. Our joke was you could have any kind of toothpaste you wanted as long as it was Colgate. We sold toothbrushes. We sold combs. We sold a bunch of different soaps. But there was one of everything.
Did you sell food also?
Oh, it was mostly food,
What kind of food?
health food.
How did you?
Granola.
I'm sorry? Granola? Was granola invented back then?
Lots of
Relevance.
granola.
352?
Right,
There's an exception for humor.
it was
When
a,
I hear humor, I'll warm to it.
yeah, no, thanks for keeping it light. Now let's move to the next area.
All right. So, Bob, when you went into the city, did you actually go to the Durst organization from time to time to work?
I did not work. Sometimes Dad would tell me that there's a such and such meeting, and would you please come and sit in the room during the meeting? And periodically I would do that. But I would do it sort of my way. In Middlebury, Vermont, I would wear jeans and a work shirt. Dad convinced me. Actually, one day when we were walking to dinner, he stopped at Brooks Brothers. Brooks Brothers was known as the store for executives. It's not like it is now, where there are Brooks Brothers in lots of shopping centers. Then there was one Brooks Brother. It was in Manhattan, in Midtown.
Was there more or less a uniform for working at the Durst organization?
That was it.
What?
So I bought a suit, and periodically I would go into the business and sit in on a meeting. I felt bad about rejecting Seymour. My dad felt that I was rejecting this business which he had spent his lifetime creating for me. Except I did not feel like it was for me. I felt he was doing what he loved doing, period.
And did you want to do that?
I felt like I should do something so that he did not feel like I was being spiteful to him.
On the other hand, what was your work uniform in Middlebury, Vermont?
Jeans and a work shirt.
How were you more comfortable?
In Middlebury, Vermont, I was never comfortable in my suit.
Kathy was living with you by then in Vermont and running the store. How did she feel about your trips to New York to work for the Durst organization?
Whenever I told Kathy that I was going to New York for several days, she would start to get sort of upset. I think she guessed what was going to happen in the future, which was that I was eventually going to give in and go to work in the Durst organization.
So, again, did you want to do that? Did you want to go give up what you had in Vermont?
I wanted to stay in Vermont, but I convinced myself that I should go work in the Durst organization for a couple of years, and then Dad would see that I did not like it and that I was not good at it, and it would be okay with him if I did not work in the Durst organization. By 1971, Kathy and I had decided to get married.
All right. So, my next question was going to be how long you and Kathy had the store in Vermont.
Probably a year and a half.
That gets us to 1971.
In 1971, we decided we would get married. My initial reaction, I wanted to make sure Kathy was aware that I did not want to have children.
I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But first, I want, there was a photograph that was, the jury's already seen it, but I'd like to put it up again and ask you about it. It's our number, it hadn't been marked yet as ours, but it's our number 8.
Pete, what, People's Exhibit number?
I'm not sure what number it was. It's the People's Exhibit. Can we have it marked as ours?
Could be defense age.
Oh yeah, this screen is not working, so the jury will have to take a look at this other screen.
I think the TV just needs to be turned on.
No, it's a problem. The jury can look at this today. We'll have it restored in the morning.
So Bob, what's the number? What's the exhibit?
Your Honor, it was People 63.
People 63.
Defense.
Your Honor, should we mark it as ours also?
So why don't we, I think it's going to get confusing if we double mark exhibits.
Yeah.
It's People
So-
63.
I agree.
That's the rule.
People 63. So Bob, what are we looking at? Can you see it?
Yes, it's me in my hippie uniform and Kathy on our wedding day.
What day was that?
We did it on my 30th birthday, April 12th, 1973.
Where in the world did you get that tie? That didn't come from Brooks Brothers, did it?
He hadn't met Chip Lewis yet, had he?
He had not. You don't have to answer that. Bob, tell us about that day.
Well, as it was, Kathy's father died when she was 12 from colon cancer. It was a terrible thing that she went through and that her father went through. In those days, if you got colon cancer, well, maybe it's the same way today, but what her father went through was having an incision in his side and a bag attached to it, kind of like the bag that I've got here for my urine, but this was for his
Maybe relevant
poop.
to Your Honor?
And you have special clothes made. What?
Just a minute.
Oh,
You, go ahead.
And you have special suits made with a pocket that holds basically a day's worth of poop. And you've got to clean the thing out, of course. Seemingly, he lived for about 9 months like that, and then he died. And I can get back to our wedding day. Since Kathy had no father, and I had no mother, and neither of us was interested in having a big party, what we did was we found this glade about 10 minutes from the house in Katona. We told nobody we were getting married, except I told my dad and Kathy told her mother. We went downtown New York to the municipal building and we got a marriage license. We invited a priest and a rabbi. Kathy was Catholic. I am Jewish. But neither of us did much of the partaking of our religion. So the priest and the rabbi.
Streamline this, please.
Okay.
Priest or rabbi, I mean,
Well,
If he says they went into a bar.
No, I'm not gonna make,
I know.
I'm not gonna go there, but let's, it is a narrative, and even though this is a story.
you understand, Bob, I need to break it up in question and answer.
Yeah.
So, you and Kathy were married by both a priest and a rabbi? That's a question.
I don't know what the question is.
Okay. Is there a delay on the screen? Never
Is
mind.
there a delay on the screen? Minimal.
Okay,
But if I ask a question,
let me ask a question. You were married by both a priest and a rabbi on your birthday, is that right?
yes.
Was it a happy occasion for you?
Well, there were, so we invited Kathy's mother and my father.
My question is, was it a happy
It was
occasion?
happy.
Was Kathy happy?
Kathy was ecstatic.
Were you happy?
I was ecstatic.
Were you in love?
We were both very much in love.
Where were you living and where did you plan to live in the next year or so?
Well, about a year before we got married, But a year before we got married, I promised Dad that I would shut the store or sell the store and come work in the Durst organization. But I told him that if I did not like it, I would only do it for a little while. I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that there were people who wanted to run our health food store. So I was able to sell the lease and to sell the inventory, I guess you call it, and make a small profit. And we gave up the lease on the apartment where we were living in Middlebury.
So where were you living then when you and Kathy married?
Well, there's more to the last part of it. So I sold the store, gave up the lease on the apartment. We had bought what's called a quarter section, 160 acres of forest land on the hillside about 40 minutes outside of Middlebury, where we planned on building a house someday. So we kept the land. We moved into the Katona house, and we fixed up the apartment in the city where Susan Berman had visited us.
So
Before we did that, we went on our honeymoon.
I'm going to ask you about that. But so at the time of your marriage, were you living in Katona and the apartment in Manhattan and had given up the house in Vermont?
Yes, I gave up the rented apartment that we were living on in Vermont. It was the downstairs of a house.
All right. Now, you mentioned your honeymoon. Did you and Kathy take a honeymoon?
Yeah, so we got a van,
What
and
kind
we
of
spent a lot of time.
what kind of van? What kind of van?
Ford,
All right.
and we built all kinds of stuff in the van. We had a mattress and an ice box and some kind of a stove, and we took 2 months and drove around the country. We visited Susan. Susan had already moved to New York, so we did not visit Susan in San Francisco. We visited my baby brother Tommy in San Francisco.
What was your relationship with Tommy then?
He was 7 years younger than me. So when I got out of high school at 18, when I was 18 and moved away from Scarsdale, he was only 11. So we never saw each other very much.
All right, you mentioned that you and Kathy were taking your honeymoon by driving around the country in a van.
Yes, and on my itinerary, I left out someplace in there between Susan leaving San Francisco Chronicle and going to work for City Magazine. She bought a house on Clay Street where I had visited her. Then she moved to New York.
Okay. Now, when Susan had the house on Clay Street in San Francisco, that was before you and Kathy had met and married, right?
That was before I met Kathy, yes.
Okay. So back to your honeymoon. Do I understand, tell the jury, did you travel around the country and live in your van for a couple of months?
Yes.
Bob, even though it was trust money, did you need to live in a van traveling around the country and sleep by the side of the road?
Absolutely not.
Why did you do it?
What I wanted to do.
Did Kathy
What
want it?
we wanted to do.
And how was it?
It was fun.
You've heard Tommy, your little brother, testify here that he resented you to this day for pulling a trick on him in a revolving door. Do you remember that event?
I remember Tommy's testimony. I don't remember the incident. Tommy said, and this is when he was an adult, so I don't know how old we were then. I don't remember when he was talking about me ignoring him in the revolving door. It was not when he was little. He was a grown-up.
At any rate, tell the jury a little bit about where you went, you and Kathy, when you spent your 2-month honeymoon.
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
What did you do after you and Kathy came back from your honeymoon?
I went to work at the Durst organization. It was just like I expected it to be, and I did not love it. I barely liked it at all. I was in a room with a whole bunch of suits all day long, and people would talk about language in a lease or in a mortgage. I gradually figured out how to do things, but it was not something I loved. Meanwhile, for Kathy, life had gone the other way. Kathy's family, her brother went to college. None of her older 3 sisters went to college. Kathy did not plan on going to college. But when we were in Middlebury, she got an idea that she wanted to be a nurse. Thinking back, to when her father was so sick.
It's
did you-
time for us to break for the day because it is now after 4:30. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have you remind you not to converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. We will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Tomorrow dark?
Tomorrow is not, I have misspoken. I'm thinking ahead to Wednesday at 9 a.m. when we are returning. I'll be here tomorrow. Lawyers will be here, but you will not. You'll return Wednesday at 9 a.m. Thanks for catching that.